George Russell's future in Formula One is starting to look more uncertain, not because of his performance, but because of Mercedes' shifting priorities. He's fully aware that Max Verstappen is the team's top target, and with things unraveling rapidly at Red Bull, Russell knows he might need to find a new home before it's too late. Red Bull and Aston Martin are emerging as the most likely contenders to showcase his talent. Could we be on the verge of a blockbuster swap Verstappen to Mercedes and Russell to Red Bull? And if that happens, would it be a breakthrough or a career nosedive for George Russell? Let's be honest, most fans feel a bit sorry for Russell. He hasn't done anything wrong. He's consistent, has been matching pace with the grid's top drivers, and is holding his own in the championship battle. He even bagged a victory in Canada. And yet, his future is under threat simply because Max Verstappen might become available. When a four-time world champion even hints at switching teams, you don't wait around. That's why Toto Wolff met Verstappen in Sardinia. So, despite his solid form, Russell is now forced to consider his options. Red Bull, ironically, might be the most logical destination. If Max departs, the team will be left with a gaping hole that Russell could fill. But it wouldn't be easy. Red Bull is crumbling. It all started with Adrian Newey's quiet departure during the Miami GP and escalated to the shocking termination of Christian Horner. In between, key figures like Jonathan Wheatley and Corrin also jumped ship. If Verstappen leaves next, it's a glaring sign that something is deeply broken at Milton Keynes, and Russell could find himself walking into a storm. Now here's the real test. Russell could step into a Red Bull squad that's struggling to stay afloat, with a car that has faltered and a future hanging in the balance. Sure, he currently holds a leadership role at Mercedes, but there's rising pressure from within, especially with the emerging talent of Kimi Antonelli, dubbed as the next superstar. Russell's contract runs out at the end of 2025, but Antonelli already has a deal in place for 2026. That puts George in a very vulnerable spot. What makes this even more complicated is that Mercedes themselves manage Russell's career. So if the writing is on the wall, Toto Wolff and the board would have to break the news to George that he's no longer their number one option. Yet to Russell's credit, he isn't rattled. He's taking the speculation with grace. In his own words, every team has two seats available, and it's normal they're thinking about the future. I don't take that personally. I've always said I'm happy to be teammates with anybody. He acknowledged the swirling rumors and added, "Of course, there's a lot of chatter being pointed at me, but from my side, I don't think that's really going to be the case. I want to stay with Mercedes moving forward. However, if Mercedes does cut ties, Red Bull might not be the easy landing spot it once was. With Horner gone, the internal dynamics have shifted." Russell had reportedly spoken to Horner before his exit, possibly laying the groundwork for a future deal if things with Verstappen fell apart. But now, with Laurent Mekies at the helm, Red Bull may shift focus toward its junior program. That could mean promoting young drivers like Arvid Lindblad or Isak Hajar, rather than hiring from outside. It's a bold philosophy similar to what Mercedes is doing with Antonelli. But experience will matter immensely in the new regulation era beginning in 2026. That's why Racing Bull CEO Peter Bayer said he'd handcuff Hajar until the end of 2026, just to stop him from going to Red Bull. All of this opens a door for George Russell to step in and prove Mercedes made a massive mistake, especially as Red Bull prepares to launch its own power units badged by Ford. But let's not forget Red Bull isn't Russell's only option. Aston Martin is still in the picture, watching all of this unfold very, very closely. Aston Martin, the Silverstone-based squad, has quietly been assembling a powerhouse behind the scenes. With big-name recruits like Adrian Newey, Andy Cowell, and Enrico Cardile now on board, the ambition is crystal clear. But perhaps the most intriguing part of this story? Honda. And the fact that both Cowell and George Russell once collaborated at Mercedes. That reunion could become a secret weapon for Aston Martin's rising ambitions. Behind closed doors, there are growing reports that Lawrence Stroll views Russell as the cornerstone of Aston Martin's next big project. But with current contracts tangled between Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll, there are some serious obstacles that would need to be cleared. Now, due to the father-son dynamic at Aston Martin, it's highly unlikely that Russell would take over Lance Stroll's seat. The Canadian is on rolling yearly contracts, and while Alonso does have a binding agreement for 2026, the two-time world champion understands how the sport works better than anyone. If Russell becomes available, Fernando knows he might need to step aside. His future with the team is already secure, He's set to become an ambassador post-retirement. Sure, he might miss out on finally driving a newly designed car, but for the greater good of Aston Martin's future, it might be a sacrifice worth making. This path actually fits Russell far better than many realize. At Aston Martin, he would have a teammate in Lance Stroll who isn't nearly as competitive, giving Russell clear leadership status. And if that Honda-powered car turns out to be fast and reliable, you can bet Russell will capitalize. Let's not forget this is one of the best qualifiers on the grid, a driver who delivers when it matters. He could very well be the man to bring Aston Martin their first championship title. The situation at Red Bull wouldn't be much different. Without Verstappen, there isn't a dominant in-house driver. But if young talents like Arvid Lindblad or Isak Hajar adapt faster than expected, Russell might once again find himself in a tight teammate battle similar to his current situation with Kimi Antonelli. Which raises the ultimate question. Will George actually part ways with Mercedes? Even if he doesn't, one thing is clear, Russell knows he's not Toto Wolff's #1 pick. Wolff can publicly praise the current lineup all he wants, but the prolonged flirtation with Verstappen speaks volumes. If George was truly the long-term guy, Mercedes wouldn't be entertaining a move for Max. That's the pressure Russell is feeling, and it's starting to take a toll. Let's not forget, this is the same George Russell who spent 3 years in the backmarker Williams, then stepped up to be Hamilton's teammate, and still delivered. In the current ground effect era, Mercedes has claimed 6 wins and 7 pole positions. Russell is responsible for 4 wins and 6 of those poles. That's not a guy you just toss aside. With Mercedes poised to challenge for both championships in 2026, sidelining Russell in favor of Verstappen wouldn't just be brutal, it would be unfair. Yet Russell can't afford to wait for Wolff and Verstappen to dictate his future. He may be better off taking control, carving his own path, and making a bold move now rather than sitting in limbo. The danger? Even if he starts winning races this year, that could push Verstappen out of the top 3 and activate Max's exit, Klaus potentially backfiring and damaging George's own chances of staying with the team. It's a cruel irony, but such is the cutthroat nature of Formula One, brutal, businesslike, and unforgiving. Of course, all of this remains speculative for now. As of this moment, Russell is still a Mercedes driver. And interestingly, some reports close to the team suggest that Horner's departure won't affect George's standing at all. In fact, there are even whispers that Mercedes is working to extend his contract by another 3 years, suggesting that all this market noise might just be, well, noise. Still, the rumors alone are creating negative tension inside the team, and that's hard to ignore. So we're throwing it to you. What do you think? Should George Russell take a leap and join Red Bull if the opportunity arises? And more importantly, do you think Toto Wolff will actually go all in on Verstappen after that now infamous meeting in Sardinia? Let us know in the comments below, and once you do, check out the video that's just popped up on your screen right now. You won't want to miss it.